Less than 48 hours away from a painful, unnecessary government shutdown triggered exclusively by House Republicans, their surrogates in the Fox propaganda network tried to hit Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg with a gotcha, but were once again ill-prepared for his rhetorical aikido. But before we unpack all that, if you haven't yet, please hit that like, subscribe, and the alert bell. Maybe check out my Patreon. I'd appreciate the support. All right, folks, this is a goodie. It's going to be relatively short, but here's the situation. On October 1st, if we do not have a bipartisan budget agreement, which is signed into law by President Biden, we will have a government shutdown. The United States government will shut down. And as has been the case throughout all of modern history, when shutdowns occur, Republicans are in charge of the House of Representatives. They're a bad faith, disloyal, authoritarian party that has no interest in responsibly governing. They managed to find the time to squeeze in a ridiculous impeachment inquiry into President Biden and hold a formal hearing, eating up valuable legislative time that they could have been using more productively. And their surrogates in the media, including on the straight news aspect of the Fox propaganda network by Bill Hemmer, they tried to hit the Biden administration with a gotcha, but they were ill-prepared for Pete Buttigieg once again. So let's play this clip and unpack it together.
And can you tell us today when the president will make that visit for the people who continue to struggle in East Palestine?
Now, for context, Bill Hemmer is asking Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg about East Palestine, Ohio, which experienced a brutal train derailment, which has led to fires and ecological catastrophe, chemical catastrophe since February. And the federal government has been working with state and local authorities in Pennsylvania and Ohio since February to deal with it. But that is the context for Bill Hemmer's question. Why hasn't President Biden personally visited East Palestine?
Well, I'm really glad that you asked about East Palestine. I don't have any scheduling news to make, but I do want to point out that the House Republican demands for budget cuts that they're threatening a shutdown over include cutting railroad safety inspections, as if we had learned nothing from East Palestine. Some of the same Republican congressmen who couldn't wait to get on television to try to make a partisan issue out of the pain of the people in East Palestine are now not on the record supporting a Railway Safety Act, one of the many things that is sitting in Congress right now that should get a lot more of their time and attention than a made-up impeachment inquiry. This is a serious issue that deserves serious work, and House Republicans should drop their demands to cut railroad safety inspections, and they should get to work on a bipartisan Railway Safety Act that would actually help us make America's railroads safer.
Got it.
Now, before Bill Hemmer responds, I just want to say that was artfully done. Brilliant. Pete Buttigieg, of course, as we know, is one of the most proficient rhetoricians and debaters in the professional Democratic Party alongside Gavin Newsom. But I love how he took the opportunity. He didn't evade the question. He answered it. He said, listen, I'm not President Biden's scheduler. I don't have any scheduling news. But if we're really concerned about East Palestine and making productive results and hopefully trying to avoid a situation like this, then Republicans need to get their act together and approve a bipartisan budget and actually honor the terms of the deal that they made with President Biden months ago. Republicans are not only acting dysfunctionally and chaotically, they're going back on a commitment they made with the president when they had the debt ceiling negotiation. So again, just beautifully done, but there's more.
I know you're not at the White House, but I just want to put a fine point on this. You're not saying today when the president will go.
I don't have scheduling news to make, but I want to emphasize the policy news here, which is that there is a Railway Safety Act right now in Congress, and some of the very same political figures who tried to score partisan points off the pain of the people of East Palestine they won't even go on the record whether they're for and against it.
To be fair to them, they at least went there. They went to the town. They met with the people.
No, actually, a lot of these people just went on Fox News. They didn't go to East Palestine like I did. They went on Fox News to try to use the people of East Palestine.
Well,
and now we're going to find out whether they're serious. Because either they're for...
J.D. Vance and Sherrod Brown, by the way, are senators for Ohio, so it would absolutely make sense.
J.D. Vance, a Republican.
Yeah, and by the way, J.D. Vance and Sherrod Brown are doing the great work.
Donald Trump, a Republican.
Yeah, and they're doing the great work of initiating. And I was there too, and our department was there within hours. But a lot of these people who are trying to politicize it, and you mentioned Sherrod Brown and J.D. Vance, one Democrat, one Republican, both of them advancing this legislation that is just sitting there. Especially on the House side. And the idea that a Republican member of the House has time to go down to a committee room and launch an impeachment inquiry over, they can't even say what it's over. They're just hoping if they keep inquiring, they'll find something. And they don't have time to move the Railway Safety Act forward. It really tells you how screwed up the priorities are on Capitol Hill right now.
So this is so crucially important. And again, Bill Hemmer is so woefully outmatched, but he tried to double down. He's like, well, listen, but to put a fine point on it, you can't say when President Biden will visit. Now, listen, we should be consistent here. I think it's important for political figures to make visits to sites of disasters. President Biden, for example, went to Maui a couple of weeks ago or a month ago during the wildfire situation after they were able to get it under control, right? That way he wasn't diverting resources. There's importance to seeing the leader of the free world on site, shaking hands, and interacting with people at a time of a crisis. There's enormous symbolic value to that, and it doesn't matter if it's Republican or Democrat. But just a few things. As important as symbolic gestures are, and I do mean that they are, I give credit for President Biden when he makes them. Therefore, I do think they're valuable, so I'm not going to pretend that they're not. But policy is always more important. I should say always. It's at the very least as important as symbolism. And as a matter of fact, symbolism is only important in as much as it, shapes policy, right? Policy at the end of the day is more substantive. It is more important. And what's interesting is the Fox Propaganda Network, when President Biden went to Maui, again, during the wildfire situation, they belittled. They remarked it as being an empty gesture or a harmful gesture because, again, they thought it was diverting resources. So it's like they can't make up their mind if symbolic gestures and visitation from the President of the United States matters or if it doesn't. It sounds like when President Biden does it, it doesn't matter. It doesn't count. It's actually it's a useless gesture. It's virtue signaling. And then if he doesn't do it, well, then it's extremely important. And months after the fact, 7 months after the fact, or 8 months after the fact, it's important to talk about. They can't make their mind up because they're just contrarian. What's important is the opposite of whatever Biden does at any given time. But even the examples that Bill Hemmer cited, Ohio senators visited East Palestine. Well, that makes sense. They're even more direct representatives of the citizens of East Palestine, Ohio, than President Biden is. Then he mentioned Donald Trump. Well, Donald Trump's visitation to East Palestine is just symbolism. There's no hope for policy because he's not in a position of power. He's not the president. He's not a member of the legislature. It was just a symbolic gesture. And also note that Hemmer ignored members of the Biden administration, the EPA administrator Michael Reagan, Pete Buttigieg, the Secretary of Transportation, one of the most powerful men in the country. They were on ground. They were there before Donald Trump, and yet Bill Hemmer doesn't mention them. So see how they're grading Republicans on a curve? But again, he's just no match for Pete Buttigieg, who says, listen, whether or not you agree that President Biden should go, and there's an argument to be made there, at the very least for politics, even if there's not much of substance to be brought by the president visiting, because people have been effectively hitting him, like, why won't he go? Now, others have pointed out there are hundreds of derailments, train derailments, which occur all the time. And Donald Trump didn't visit them all when he was president. Barack Obama didn't visit them all when he was president, and nor does President Biden. So that there's also some, context there as well. But fair enough, even if you agree, even if you believe that President Biden should have gone, especially when he was challenged to do so, well, at the end of the day, that's a subjective determination to make. That's a legitimate criticism to make. But at the end of the day, legislation and policy matters more. And what Republicans are doing right now, they're not only not passing a bipartisan budget which would help rail inspections and prevent something like East Palestine from ever occurring again, they're actively proposing cuts which would further increase the likelihood that an East Palestine would occur again. So Pete Buttigieg is correct to point this all out. He's so good at this, and the Fox propagandists are so ill-prepared for him because he's smarter than they are. He's better informed on the facts than they are. He's more rhetorically proficient than they are. So I thought you all would appreciate it as we head into this weekend, another substantive Pete Buttigieg dunk.